So welcome everyone. I'm Ann Quigley. I'm the programs coordinator here at Poly Hill. Thank you all for being with us virtually this evening. We're really excited to have Andy Brand here. We hope to have him here in person, but this is the second best thing. And we're hoping that next year, if possible, he'll be able to visit us on Martha's Vineyard in person. But this way, we're actually able to share his presentation with some of our friends and members who aren't on Martha's Vineyard. So we're excited about that as well. And I want to start right off by mentioning that this program is made possible by a sponsorship from the Duke's Soil Conservation District. So we're very grateful for their support. So today, Andy's going to talk to us about how we can increase biodiversity in our own yards, concentrating on the importance of native plants. And he's promised that he's going to share pictures of some of the thousands of species found in his former Hamden, Connecticut yard and his current Bristol, Maine yard. And we're hoping that some of these might inspire you to buy some native plants. So I have to plug our online fall plant sale that's opening up this Monday, the 14th. It's going to be open for a month. We've got a lot of unique and native plants available, and they're all going to be 30% off with an additional 20% off for members. So you can find more info about that on our website if you are so inspired after Andy's talk. So about Andy. Andy was at Broken Arrow Nursery in Hamden, Connecticut as the nursery manager for 27 years prior to coming to the Coastal Maine Botanical Garden in 2018, where he is now the Curator of Living Collections. He's also the co-founder and past president of the Connecticut Butterfly Association. And he's volunteered for the New England Plant Conservation Program, where he's helped monitor historical sites of endangered native plants. And just kind of a fun thing I thought I'd mention, Andy, he has a Facebook page called Seeing Nature, Observations from New England, which is dedicated to native flora and fauna. So that's another thing you can check out afterwards if you're interested. So if you have questions or comments throughout the program, feel free to type them in the Q&A or the comment section, and we'll get to them at the end. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Andy. Welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ann. This is great. Been looking forward to this. We've been trying to do this for a couple of years now, and it's finally happening. So it's great to be here and have all of you joining virtually. To talk about two of my favorite subjects, native plants and insects and wildlife and their interactions. And my hope tonight is to share with you some of my favorite trees and shrubs and perennials that I find increase the diversity in our yards if we plant them. So let's see, I'm going to stop this video for myself and begin. So what really kind of started me in this whole idea of how we can increase diversity in our yards. I grew up and I've lived in Connecticut all my life except for the past 3 years where I moved to Maine. And Connecticut, I've watched over the 50 plus years that I've lived there, that the development was just out of control, and land was just being gobbled up, and it was always, these beautiful farm fields, and that were the first ones to be, taken by developers because they were just, so easy for them to come in and put in their developments and destroy the, the native plants and the insects and things that were associated with them. And, all these fields and forests were replaced with these, developments with a cul-de-sac, and so many times the road was put in and the land was cleared and nothing would happen for so long, and then eventually you would start getting these just these monstrosities put in, replacing the the native flora and fauna. And I did a little looking into the Connecticut countryside and development, you know, just by town, and it was pretty striking. This is from 2006, so quite a few years ago. But you can see where the development is obviously, you know, down in the Fairfield County area and all along, you know, I-95. And then when you get into the central part of Connecticut, then you will shoot up I-91 heading up towards, you know, Hartford and then up into Springfield. And you can just see the development just blossoming away from the highway, you know, close to where the major cities are. But then even down along the coast, you know, here where I-95 goes, you can see the development is pretty heavy. And then up here, you see 395 would go up the eastern part of Connecticut. And it was just striking that, you know, not a huge amount of land was really untouched. And that development, you know, even, you know, these past few years has just continued to increase and, you know, just really take a toll on our native flora and fauna. And what's being replaced are developments that just don't, there's nothing there that's increasing our biodiversity and the diversity of flora and fauna that is so critical to maintaining healthy ecosystems. So I was just trying to think of ways and plants and just ways to convey to people things that we can do in our own yards, even with this development, that we can encourage this biodiversity and maybe get our neighbors to kind of follow suit so we can create these kind of biodiverse corridors, if you will, in our neighborhoods. And I did find this one picture of Martha's Vineyard, which is kind of interesting. It just shows that you guys have been great. There's a lot of protected open space on the island. But then it was interesting just to see that the dark green colors that's available land or potentially available land to development. So there's still quite a bit of land that is, you know, could be developed on the island. And I think it's just very valuable for people to, you know, support, you know, arboretums and conservation groups and, you know, groups that are trying to preserve land, because, you know, without this land, we are going to lose the biodiversity that's so critical for us to have a healthy ecosystem, for us to live properly. You know, and, you know, these type of things, there are always these cookie cutter developments that come up. You know, it's basically non-native plants that are put in there, you know, calorie pears and, you know, usually some Norway maples even, if they haven't been, you know, banned from the state because their invasiveness, and lots of lawns. And you can see here, there's, you know, the dwarf Alberta spruce there, you know, and it just goes on and on. You know, here's a beautiful example. You're not going to get a lot of biodiversity in this landscape. You know, I don't care how well you prune your yews into cubes and ovals and round blobs. You know, this is probably one of the lowest diversity until you get behind the house, where you have, you know, maybe a line of oaks and things where maybe that is luckily supporting some biodiversity in this person's yard. You know, and it just goes on and on. New houses, here's nothing's planted. They don't even have any plants around the foundation, just one lonely tree that was put in, and grass going right up to the tree base. You know, and here you can see the old stone wall. So this was probably beautiful farmland, you know, or a meadow, and it's been cleared and now, you know, pretty lifeless with just the lawn. And this is kind of what I was doing before I left my yard in Connecticut. And this is kind of what I've been encouraging people to do. And I hope, you know, many of you are doing or will try to do more of once we get done this evening. And that's just increase the diversity of plant material that you have in your yards. You know, and I tried to concentrate on native plants, but, you know, I worked at Broken Arrow Nursery where we focused on rare and unusual trees and shrubs from all over the world, you know, that were non-invasive that we grew there. And I do have a combination, and I don't have an issue with people, you know, incorporating some non-native plants into their landscape if they're not invasive and won't be potentially invasive in the future. You know, there's nothing wrong with adding a plant just because it's aesthetically beautiful, but I really try to encourage the majority of the plants that are used, that they are native and they will support a wide, diverse variety of insects and birds and animals and things that we want in our yards. This is what we don't want. And one of my biggest pet peeves are just these massive expanses of lawns. You know, there's really, I mean, I'm not against lawn and for, you know, to have in your yards. I mean, that's perfectly acceptable. I had some. It's wonderful for to play with your children and your dogs, and just to have and go out and, you know, run barefoot through and just enjoy, and, you know, to break up your garden areas. But, you know, do we need these things, these massive expanses where you have to get on the rider and spend majority of the day mowing it? You know, the cost to the environment with having these lawns is just astronomical, with the pollution that, you know, is caused by the mowing machines and the herbicides and the fungicides and things that are dumped on these lawns, you know, daily. It's just terrible. And I found some facts, you know, even if these facts are only partially true, they're pretty scary if you look at the numbers that they propose here. You know, what mowing a lawn can do, you know, just an hour, 350 miles of, you know, in terms of volatile organic compounds, and, you know, the amount of time, the pollutants of 8 cars by mowing your lawn. And just the one that really worries me is that, you know, the 800 million gallons of gas are used for either gas trimmers or mowing machines of some sort. And, you know, I mow my lawn still, and I try to reduce the amount of lawn I have, and I encourage people to reduce the lawn if they can. You know, they don't need necessarily these massive expanses, because lawn basically, you know, it's monoculture. There's not a lot of life that's going to be supported by just these massive sections of lawn. And this is the most scary, you know, how much when we're filling up, you know, your push mower, your mower, and a little bit drips out or the can leaks, how much, you know, even if this is just half true, 17 million gallons, it's just mind boggling to me. So, you know, let's not mow as much grass. And like I said, the herbicides and the fungicides, I thought this was a perfect example. You can see which neighbor uses herbicides on their lawn and fertilizers and which one doesn't. You know, on the right-hand side here, you can see my cursor, hopefully, you know, no dandelions on this side really, but then you get over in this neighbor and there's all kinds of dandelions. And I have no issue with dandelions either. I'm not going to really talk about them tonight, but if you have honeybees, they're one of the first sources when the honeybees first come out of their hives in the spring. You know, dandelions are starting to flower, and the honeybees just go to them looking for the food that they need after they've been hibernating over the winter time. So when we're gardening for increasing biodiversity and, you know, just animal and plant diversity in our yards, you know, I usually take a different approach, and I encourage you to as well. You know, we're trying to encourage insects and caterpillars and things that will eat our plants, because, you know, many of those caterpillars will turn into incredible butterflies and moths. So, you know, if your plants are damaged, that means you're planting the right plants. You're encouraging, you know, our native insects to come in and feed on these plants because you're putting the right ones in your yard. I love weeding. It's one of my favorite pastimes. But I don't remove every weed, because many of those weeds, if you look in a guidebook, you'll find that many of those weeds are actually the food for many of our native butterflies and moths. Many of the caterpillars will feed on several different types of weeds. If there's a part of your yard where you can like leave it and just see what grows up, you know, it's amazing what will come up after a year or two. Goldenrods and different types of grasses and asters and, you know, different perennials, and even some tree species, you know, birch will come back, and cherry trees and things like that. If you can do that, I'm all for it, and I encourage you to do that. As I've talked about quite a bit, is, you know, eliminate more of your lawn if you can. Include as wide a range of plant species in your yard. Most of them ideally would be native plant species. You know, they'll support a wide range of insects and animals, and they're also very, very beautiful. And then obviously we want to reduce the number of pesticides and herbicides, either reduce them, eliminate them completely, or try to just be really careful when we use them as, a very last means. If we have a working ecosystem and everything is going, we have a good diversity of plants, a lot of these insect issues will take care of themselves, and we can eliminate the use of pesticides, because so many of our pesticides, they are not selective. So if you're spraying for gypsy moths and you're spraying your oak trees, you are going to knock down every caterpillar that's feeding on that oak tree, not just the gypsy moths. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about control of some of the insects if need be. And you're going to hear a lot about insects because insects, they rule our world. And the ecologist, biologist E.O. Wilson, he came up with a great little quote that I love, is that insects are the little things that run the world. And without insects, we would really be in really bad shape. 96% of the terrestrial birds we have here in North America feed their young. They rely on insects to feed their young. So they're looking for those caterpillars and those aphids and other types of bugs and beetles and things to feed their young. So this bluebird is looking for, one of those cutworms that's in your garden, or something, one of the sawflies that's feeding on one of your oak leaves. So if we want to encourage, all the different trophic levels in our yards, it starts with putting plants in our yard, native plants in our yard that are going to increase as many insect species as we can, because we need insects to have all of these other trophic levels. So this is just a picture of my yard in Connecticut just prior to when I left. You can see it's jammed with plants. There is some lawn. Most of that, it looks like grass here, but when you get up close, majority is dandelions and clover and ajuga and any other kind of ground ivy, things like that I didn't worry about, because it provided some nectar at some point. It provided, the clovers are food sources for the clouded sulfur butterfly, that common yellow butterfly that you're probably seeing right now flying around your yards. They lay their eggs on white and red clover, are two of the main food sources. So, this is what I left, and this is kind of what I encourage you and others to try to, work towards. A yard, you can just see all the different types of plants. It's not, it's just a huge diversity of plant materials. And I was fortunate also in my yard in Hamden to have a few acres of, it was an old Christmas tree plantation. And it was reverting back to, we cut the trees down, so it was kind of like a blue stem grass meadow at first. And then it was kind of interesting to watch it as it was starting to succeed, and the trees and shrubs that were coming back into the meadow. And the plants that I'm going to share with you tonight, roughly like a dozen trees and shrubs, and then just 2 perennials, are all things that I've observed over the 27 years that I lived in Hamden, Connecticut, and then the 3 years that I lived here in Bristol. And it's just my observations as to the plants that I saw the most diversity of insects on. And I just encourage you, one of the things when you're trying to decide what the plant is, most of my plant selection was based on observations, and I just encourage you all to be observant. I mean, that's just so critical when you're in your yard. Watch what the butterflies are doing. Watch what the different insects are doing. What are they, going to? If you're in a preserve, what types of plants are they flocking to and feeding on? And then try to bring that information that you've learned back to your own yard and try to incorporate it into your own garden designs. So let's start with the plants. So we're going to start with the mighty oaks. And oaks, they're just very, very, just so beneficial. I don't know how many of you have read Doug Tallamy's book, Bringing Nature Home, but it's a fantastic book. And it kind of, a lot of what I talk about tonight, you'll read in his book. It's just fantastic book that just describes the benefits of native plants and their close tie with our native insects. And he created a list. They did a study of trees and perennials and looked at the types of Lepidoptera that these different trees and shrubs and perennials attract. And you see at the very top of the list for the woody plants or native woody plants there's oak. And oak support over 530 types of Lepidoptera, 530 types of butterflies and moths. So their caterpillars use different types of oak as their host plants that their caterpillars will feed on. And then you see, we go down the list to cherries and willows and poplars and birch as the top 5 native trees that we want to incorporate in our yards. And then just cruising down here to the herbaceous plants, the one plant that most people are so afraid of because they connect it with hay fever and allergies and things that are occurring this time of year. And it's unfortunately solidagos or goldenrods, they get a bad rap. It's the ragweed that's flowering right now that is providing everybody with that lovely runny nose and those itchy eyes that I suffer from too. Goldenrods, the pollen on goldenrods is very heavy and it tends to drop to the ground rather than float in the air like the pollen on the ragweeds. And then you just see a few of the other top 5 perennial plants that attract the most butterflies and moths. And just to show you some of the incredible insects that I found supported by oaks, this is the white M hairstreak butterfly. And you can see part of its wing has been removed. It probably was a lucky butterfly and escaped being eaten by a bird. All the hairstreak butterflies, you can see in this picture, you see where my cursor is, this kind of black tail that comes off the hind wing of many of the hairstreak butterflies. But when they're at rest, they move their hind wings up and down very slowly. So that motion wiggles these appendages on their wings. So it's thought that by wiggling those appendages that fakes a bird thinking that that's where the butterfly's head is, thinking those might be antennae. And the butterfly comes in and bites the wrong end of the bird comes in and bites the wrong end of the butterfly and gets a beak full of wing, and the butterfly is able to escape. And it's amazing how butterflies can still fly quite well, even with part of their wing removed. Next time, now that this wing is removed, the butterfly may not be able to fake out that bird. But it shows you how beautiful the coloration is of this hairstreak butterfly on the ventral side. So unfortunately, this butterfly never opens its wings when it's at rest. They're always closed. You only see this blue when it's flying by, but it was fortunate that for me that I could get a photo with showing that blue. It's almost like if you've ever been in the tropics and you see those beautiful blue morpho butterflies, it's that same intense blue color. And just another, this is an early flying juvenile dusky wing butterfly that flies early in the season and lays its eggs mostly on different types of oak trees. And just, tonight, my main goal is just to hopefully get you really excited about the diversity and some of the crazy things you're going to see on our native plants that are right in our backyards for many of us. This is a morning glowing prominent caterpillar. And what this feeds on, says it's called morning glory, but it feeds on oaks. And you see how the edges of this caterpillar, they're all jagged, and it's the green coloration matches the leaf, and so does the coloration of the abdomen here matches where the leaf has been eaten, and it's starting to get necrotic areas. The colorations are perfect, so it escapes being eaten by birds by mimicking the damage caused to the leaf by other insects, which is just, I think, pretty fascinating. And then not just, oaks don't just support many of our insects, but, many of our, things like chipmunks and squirrels right now are busy going around, the acorns are starting to fall and they're, grabbing them all and taking them back and hiding them. And our blue jays are starting to migrate. And if you ever see blue jays and how many, they stuff in so many acorns, and, holding one of those massive acorns in their bill is always a treat to see. So oaks really support such a wide, range of creatures. Turkeys love the acorns, as do other mammals as well. Prunus serratina, black cherry. Not many people actually go to a nursery and actually pick out black cherry, but it is a fantastic native tree. It has wonderful glossy dark green foliage that you see on the left-hand side of the screen, and really attractive small white flowers that are in these 4 to 5 inch long inflorescence at the ends of the branches that you see here. And older trees really develop this wonderful kind of flaky, rough, coarse bark that you see on the left-hand side here. But black cherries support one of our more common swallowtail butterflies. This is the eastern tiger swallowtail. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. It's a large, maybe a 4-inch wingspan yellow butterfly that is, you'll see flying a couple times a year. It has a brood of adults that fly earlier in the season, and then also just this past month, some more were flying. But the females, one of their main foods at the eastern tiger swallowtail, they'll look for black cherry trees to lay their eggs on. And if you're fortunate enough to find the caterpillar of the eastern tiger swallowtail on a black cherry leaf, this is what you're going to find. And this is a fairly mature caterpillar. It's about 1.5 inches long. The head is actually tucked in the bottom of the screen here. These are fake eye spots. Thought to, the purpose of these is to scare off a predator. It looks like maybe a serpent, particularly when this caterpillar is scared or is threatened. Out of the top of its head shoot these orange horns, which are called osmeterium. And when it does that, it also gives off this foul odor. So between the fake eye spots, the orange horn shooting out of the top of his head, and the stinky odor, it's thought all 3 of these things combined will spook off a potential bird or another predator that's maybe trying to either eat this caterpillar or parasitize it, like a wasp or a fly. The one thing too with these caterpillars, they don't conceal themselves. They rest on like a bed of silk on the top surface of the leaf. And that is because they're eating black cherries, and black cherry leaves have toxic chemicals in them that these caterpillars are able to deal with when they ingest the foliage. So that makes the caterpillars distasteful to birds and things. So birds will hopefully, if they try one, they'll learn not to eat additional ones. One of our other native butterflies, the coral hair streak. This is a small hair streak. You see this one does not have those kind of wiggly appendages on the hind wing, but just has these beautiful orange spotting on the hind wing, wonderful antennae with the alternating white and black bands. But interesting, rather than searching out the larger black cherry trees, the female coral hair streak looks for young cherry trees. So because I had that field in my backyard that was succeeding back to forest, black cherry is one of the first trees that shows up in these successional fields. So it's one of the first trees that's going to start to grow and develop. And so this field every year before I mowed it in the fall, it would have, hundreds of these little black cherry trees that were, 2 to 4 feet tall. And that's what this female coral hair streak would look for. They look for these pencil thin stemmed cherry trees to lay their eggs on. And I spent hours one day, years and years ago, chasing a female hair streak until I finally found her, and she laid an egg. And you can see on the top left, you can see the kind of diameter of this young cherry tree. And here, right in the center, is the egg of that coral hair streak that she laid. Right down in the bottom, kind of in all the old leaf litter and dying leaves of the little blue stem grasses and other native grasses that were growing around this cherry tree. And then this just shows you the unique coloration of the caterpillar of the coral hair streak. And then just some really wacky things you're going to find on black cherries. And these are actually, if you go to some smaller black cherry trees that you maybe have growing, you know, along your road where they cut them down frequently, or in your yard, some young ones, turn over the leaves, you know, take branches and flip them over, and you'll find some of these really fascinating moth caterpillars known as slug moth caterpillars. It's a whole group called slug moths, and that's because the way these caterpillars move, it mimics the movement of a slug. And they're no more than maybe the 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch long, but they're just the shape of them and the delicateness of so many of them are just amazing. This is the crown slug, and feeding on black cherry. And I don't know, probably some of you are familiar with the saddleback caterpillar. Hopefully you haven't brushed up against this one, because these are actually stinging spines that it has on its body. And it'll give you a short, brief time of kind of painfulness, where it's kind of like if you've ever brushed against stinging nettle. So you get a burning, painful sensation in your leg or your arm or whatever you brush up against it. And these will also be feeding on black cherry. It's called the saddleback caterpillar because of the shape on its body. It resembles the shape of a saddle. So it's just, I'm just trying to show you and just demonstrate the diversity that we have on our native trees, and we can encourage in our yards if we plant some of these cool plants, and we get these cool insects as well. And then the silk moths, the cecropia moth. Here at the gardens, we have a native butterfly and moth house where we incorporate all native plants inside. It's a big hoop, a greenhouse that we cover with a mesh screening, and we bring in native butterflies and moths, and they are able to complete their entire life cycle in this greenhouse. And it's so fun to watch, you know, these silk moths, things like cecropia moths develop. I mean, this is a massive caterpillar. Imagine something at least as big around as your thumb and maybe 4 inches long, you know, almost like a hot dog size. And this incredible green color, and then these just amazing knobs of red and turquoise blue and yellow. You know, here's a close-up showing those just outrageous colors, and they feed on black cherry. So if you have black cherries, you know, take a look for these amazing things. Or, you know, you may even be fortunate if you leave your porch light on, or a light on your garage overnight. You may, you know, attract one of the adult moths, which are just fantastic. Here's an adult male cecropia moth. Just, you know, the wingspan is at least 5 inches. You know, these massive furry bodies, incredible creatures. So many of you are probably familiar with a relative of this blinded sphinx, the tobacco or tomato hornworms that maybe have devoured some of your tomato plants in your garden. And tomato and tobacco hornworms belong, they're also called sphinx moths, a whole group, and there are many different types of hornworms. This is the blinded sphinx, which feeds on black cherries. And usually you find these caterpillars later in the season on black cherries. And late in the season, black cherry trees, often the leaves develop this kind of leaf spot disease on them, these necrotic areas that start out kind of with this unusual maroon purplish coloration that you see here on the left-hand side. And what I find truly amazing is this blinded sphinx caterpillar, the coloration. You see the maroon purple spots on the body, and the green coloration mimics almost perfectly the coloration of the leaf spot disease and the leaf color. In the way the caterpillar, when it's threatened, it drops down like this, just clinging by its last set of legs, hanging here, you know, pulling its other legs in, you know, mimicking the way this leaf on its petiole hangs from the stem. You know, so a bird going by would just assume, oh, that's just another leaf on a cherry tree, and fly by, and this caterpillar would escape being eaten. And these are big and probably a really decent meal for a hungry bird. So just another example of how insects use camouflage to protect themselves. So I mentioned black cherries as a species of tree that is quick to return to fields that are starting to revert back to forest. Well, quaking aspen is also another species that you're going to find in these settings. It's another tree that's going to quickly try to colonize open fields if they're not mowed continuously. And this one, unless you have a larger yard, you do have to be careful with quaking aspen because it is a colonizing species and will form these pretty good sizable thickets of stems that are all, coming from one main tree. You can see the beautiful silvery undersides to the foliage that they have, and, called quaking aspen because just the subtle breeze will cause these leaves to quake and move and just reveal the silvery underside. And it's just a wonderful look, and it adds sound to the garden too, with that kind of rustling sound that you get when the wind blows these beautiful leaves. But it does need some space unless you are able to maintain the suckers or mow around it, which I used to do to maintain them and keep it more contained. But the quaking aspen supports one of a very common and wonderful butterfly called the viceroy. This is the butterfly that mimics our wonderful monarch butterfly. You see almost everything is identical. The viceroy tends to be a little bit smaller than the monarch. And then probably the easiest thing to distinguish the viceroy from the monarch is this black line that it has here. You can see on the hind wing, kind of cuts this hind wing in half. You will not find that on monarchs. And obviously they feed and lay their eggs on different types of plants. Monarchs, as you all know, typically lay their eggs on different types of milkweed, and that's what their caterpillars need to survive. Whereas viceroys, one of their main host plants or plants that the females seek out are poplars. That's what they use to lay their eggs on, as well as different types of willows are another type of host plant for the viceroy. And it's interesting, when the female viceroy finds a willow and she lands on a leaf, she does almost an abrupt turn and backs down, and 90 to 95% of the time lays her egg at the very tip of the leaf. And you can see the eggs with the naked eye, and if you carefully observe, you'll see these eggs right at the tip. And then when that caterpillar hatches out, they feed on the leaf and just leave part of the midrib, and then actually use some of their frass or poop and can maintain this midrib line supported with frass as well that supports them. So then they rest on that kind of midrib area and then can continue feeding on the leaf, leaving this kind of resting area for themselves. And as I mentioned earlier, many of our native butterflies have multiple broods, which means, a brood, you can have single broods, which means you'll see a butterfly like in April. And if that butterfly only has one brood, it will fly, and you will not see that butterfly then again until the following April. Whereas a butterfly like the viceroy has a couple of broods. So you see it earlier in the summer, and then you'll see adults flying again this time of year into, through September, where then the females will look for things like poplars, lay their eggs, and then the eggs will hatch, and the young larvae, the first instar, will begin feeding on the foliage. And then when they reach what's called maybe the second instar, so the caterpillars will go through different instars. And so caterpillars feed, and when their skin gets too tight, they shed that skin, and that's what's called an instar. And they will go through it maybe 4 or 5 instars before they're fully mature. But the interesting thing with the viceroy in the fall is this young, let's say, second instar viceroy caterpillar somehow knows that fall is coming. So it goes back to the petiole of the leaf that it's feeding on and wraps silk around that petiole and around the stem so that leaf cannot drop to the ground. That petiole is fastened on, and then continues feeding for a little bit longer until the leaf is pretty much gone, and just takes a little bit of the leaf and then takes that leaf with silk and forms this little hollow tube out of the remaining piece of leaf. And this is called referred to as a hibernaculum. And then, so we're talking, this is in October, late October, that young larvae, because all the other leaves have dropped off, there's nothing really left for it to feed on, crawls into this hibernaculum, this tube, and then remains there throughout the winter and stays there until the new buds begin to break and form and grow the following spring, then ventures out of this hibernaculum and begins to feed, and then goes through its third, fourth, and fifth instar until it's fully mature, and then pupates and forms the chrysalis. So it's just amazing that it's on this little poplar tree in the middle of a field or in your yard, and getting battered with wind and ice and snow and, you know, really cold temperatures, and has these, you know, natural chemicals in its body keeping it from freezing, and then continues to feed. And you see these alien creatures on your poplars. Sometimes these guys tend to feed together in big patches, and actually they can cause a little bit of defoliation, but, you know, not to the extent where it's going to kill the plant. These are called red-humped caterpillars. It's a type of moth, but just fascinating creatures you'll find on poplars as well as other trees and shrubs. But I typically frequently see them on different types of poplars. This is another type of moth caterpillar. This is called a furcula moth. And this one has a unique ability to, when it's scared, it has these appendage that comes out of its rear end, and it waves these around, and they kind of shoot out of its body, and it wiggles them around to scare off a potential predator. And here's an example of a caterpillar that just went through an instar. So it just shed its skin. This is one of those furcula moth caterpillars. And it just shed its skin, as you can see here. And now it's ready to commence eating again and growing bigger and bigger, and it'll shed its skin again. But just to show you what I was referring to as an instar. Flowering dogwoods, Benthamidia is the genus. The taxonomists changed it from Cornus. Fantastic tree. When I was at the nursery in Connecticut, we had one of the largest Cornus floridas I've ever seen. And when it's in fruit, it supported so many migrating birds, you know, this time of year into October, with the amazing fruit that it sets. It is a fantastic native tree for attracting birds, in my opinion. You know, the flowers are gorgeous to look at in the spring, you know, just a beautiful small native tree. Here are the beautiful clusters of red fruits that, you know, all types of birds, from, you know, thrushes to woodpeckers to tanagers to grosbeaks. I found all of them in this tree, many frequently at the same time. So fantastic bird tree. And here you see the developing flower buds for next season. But here's a wood thrush that I would find in that tree eating the fruits before it migrated south. So a great source of energy, food, you know, very nutritious for these birds. And that's what they need when they're going to migrate, you know, to points south, like Central America and South America and such. And here shows you the habit in kind of nice fall color that, you know, flowering dogwoods can get. And this is typically where people will plant flowering dogwoods. You know, they're used a lot in front yards and in lawns. But, you know, keep in mind that, you know, in the wild, it's an understory tree. You know, you see it growing underneath high canopy, and it's not going to be as dense as you see here, but it's still going to flower. It's still going to produce fruits. So don't feel that when you get one, you necessarily have to put it right in the middle of, you know, your yard in full sun. It will tolerate some shade and do quite fine. And here's just another example of the fall color. I included one conifer in this because it attracts both a very unique butterfly, native butterfly that we have in the Northeast, and also the fruits attract many different types of birds as well. So when we're talking about increasing biodiversity, you know, insects, yes, birds, why not? Let's try to get as much as possible with our plant material. Just remember, when you're planting red cedars, one, we live in the Northeast and we have lots of four-legged beasts, deer, which do like to eat them. So, you know, deer will browse the lower branches, but, you know, then you'll have at least from 4 or 5 feet up, you'll have, a nice kind of olive green cover for, birds to nest in, maybe owls to roost in if you plant several together in a nice thicket. Owls may find that very beneficial in the winter. But if you want the fruits, remember you need to plant a boy and a girl, a male and a female. They're dioecious, so you need both male and female plants if you want the fruit to develop on the female plants. And if you want to attract the birds, we need the fruit. So we need, both male and females to get that fruit set. And it's just wonderful, that blue, powder blue fruits, and you can really get some incredible fruit set. Often very visible from a distance. You see these often growing up, in highway medians. That's one tree that they leave and won't cut down because they don't typically get too big and cause issues with sight lines and power lines and things. It's another area you'll see many red cedars, and they come in all shapes and sizes. If they're seed grown, from very vertical columnar forms to these wide spreading forms. So it really you can add a lot of different unique, shapes and sizes, and they're evergreen. So it does provide you with some winter interest as well. But, birds like the cedar waxwing, aptly named, will come in flocks, and you'll literally see these trees shaking with a flock of 20 or 30 birds, and they're just, eating the fruits. And a lot of times they will just continue to come back to this tree until every fruit is gone. Same with birds like, bluebirds and robins. As they're moving around, they'll come in and feed on these fruits as well. Willows. So just looking at a few shrub species, willows are fantastic. Willows do need some space. They can get quite tall. Many of the species, they're native species, can easily get 8, 10, even up to 15 feet tall, often 10 to 12 feet wide. So they do require room if you're going to let them, reach to maturity and reach the mature size. That said, what I used to do every 4 or 5 years, once my willows would start to get in that 8-foot size or so, maybe 10 foot, I would come in literally either with, loppers, or some people I've seen use chainsaw and cut the shrubs right back to like 10 to 12 inches or so to the ground, and then let them grow back. And they're wonderful cut back. They respond just really, really well to being cut back and abused like that. They'll grow easily 3-4 feet a season with these, really beautiful foliage. A lot of times you'll see they'll come out with this kind of a maroon, orangey cast to the foliage. And then one of the main reasons to grow pussy willows are because of the flowers early in the spring. Often when, we'll get a late snow and the pussy willows will be flowering, and they attract many of our early flying pollinators, our native bees, our honeybees, will look for willows, not just things like dandelions, but they'll look for willows. So plant willows if you have honeybees, or you want to attract many of our native pollinators. The catkins and flowers, the pussy willows, are a fantastic source of food for our native bees, as well as some of our early flying butterflies and moths. And they're beautiful. The catkins, here's after a heavy fog here in Maine, the beads of water just are fantastic, just, amazing to look at. And they need space. Here you see they can form these massive thickets of stems. They're not, I would say, in the most part, necessarily aesthetically pleasing, but they're such an important food source for so many things. Here you see one of our native bumblebees glumming off some pollen from the catkins. There are many types of native willows that you can grow, and many non-native ones too. So don't hesitate to incorporate a few of those. I have seen caterpillars feeding on some of our non-native willows as well, but mostly the natives are much more beneficial to our native caterpillars and moth species and butterflies. And one in particular is the mourning cloak. And this is a unique native butterfly because it is one of the few butterflies that overwinters as the adult butterfly, kind of like you see here on the screen. frequently, this time of year, you will see this adult flying around. And as it gets colder, this adult will seek out places to hibernate, such as your wood pile or big brush piles or shagbark hickory, old shagbark hickories with the flaking bark. They'll hide themselves and crawl up inside those crevices and spend the winter there, hibernating until we get, a warm day in February or early March where it gets up to 50 or 52 and the sun's out, it's warm. These amazing creatures will venture out on those warm days and fly about and look for some source of food. And often, late February, there's not going to be there won't be a lot of food for them. Maybe a pussy willow will be starting to flower, but often these butterflies will look for things like rotting fruit or animal feces even that they utilize to get some nutrition from. Or even like a sugar maple branch that has been broken off by a storm and it's starting, because it's warming up, it's starting to drip sap from that wound. You'll see some of these butterflies that overwinter as the adult, they'll go to these sap areas and lick up the sap and get nutrition that way as well. But mourning cloaks often will lay their eggs on the different types of native willows. And mourning cloaks like to lay their eggs in massive groups, up to 100 eggs at a time in one area. And here you see what you get after 100 eggs hatch. You get 100 baby young instar caterpillars, and they feed together and slowly get bigger. And then once they start to get into like that, not necessarily the last instar, but maybe the next to last instar, when they're getting really big, they kind of venture out on their own and disperse, so they're not just destroying every leaf on a shrub. And here you can see a couple fully mature caterpillars with these very scary looking branch spines that they have all over their bodies, which are not poisonous. They don't hurt if you handle them. But imagine if you were a bird trying to swallow something with all those sharp spines, it probably won't feel very good. So they may not do that again if you try to swallow one the first time. But willows are just a fantastic source of food for not just the mourning cloaks, but many other different Lepidoptera. Bayberries, wonderful fruit, again, kind of like our dogwoods as far as having nutritional fruit. Again, male and female plants are needed for fruit set. The females set these beautiful bluish fruits that you see here, and all parts of the bayberry plant have that wonderful aroma or fragrance, that spicy aroma. And those fruits feed many birds, particularly birds like as we get into the winter and birds that overwinter here, and particularly like on the vineyard. You'll get some of these myrtle warblers or yellow rump warblers that you'll find along the shoreline where you get the goldenrods, and you'll get big expanses of bayberry with fruits, and you'll see these little birds plucking off those individual fruits. And those fruits are very highly nutritious to birds. They're filled with all kinds of good amino acids and things that they need, and they just gobble them up, and that gives them that energy that they need to deal with the cool winter temperatures that we have here in the Northeast. So very valuable food source for many birds. Spice bush. This is one plant that I would 98% recommend you planting a spice bush. And if you do so, you will get spice bush swallowtail female butterflies to lay her eggs on the leaves of your plant. That's how well this plant works. It's called the spice bush swallowtail because it likes spice bush. It's one of their main host plants besides sassafras. And these are the flowers that you get on spice bush. Spice bush you'll find in lowland areas, kind of wet red maple swamp areas. It's a large understory shrub that can get 12 to 15 feet tall. And it flowers before the leaves come out on most of our trees with these bright little yellow flowers that cover the stems. And then you have these wonderful 7-inch long, nice shiny leaves that if you crush the leaves or scratch the stems, it has a spicy aroma. That's the name spice bush. really beautiful fall color on the spice bush. And then the fruits that you'll find on the female plants. Again, an ongoing theme with many of our plants tonight, male and females are needed. And one nice thing is many of the nurseries now are starting to sex the plants that they sell. So they're indicating if they're male or female. So they're looking at the flowers and seeing if they have the stamen and anthers that the male flowers would have, or is it just the pistil that the female flowers would have. So then you will know, and you'll know that when you're buying 2 of them that you're going to get then hopefully this beautiful fruit set that you see here. And you're going to get leaves like this that you're going to see on spice bush if you have any in your yard, or if you follow my recommendation and plant one, you're going to get a female spice bush swallowtail. She's going to lay an egg, and a young caterpillar is going to hatch, and it's going to take part of a leaf, and it's going to cut the leaf and fold that leaf over itself using silk to pull the leaf over to conceal it. So if you go in and you carefully open up that silk shield there, you can see there's the young larvae. This is the young instar. It almost resembles a bird dropping in coloration. But here again, like we saw with the tiger swallowtail, you have those fake eye spots, and then you have these osmeterium that come out of the top of its head. And again, a foul odor. So it's again thought that all of these things combined are used to scare off predators. So then you let that flap go back over the caterpillar. It's concealed, protecting it as well from predators. And let's say you come back and you visit this same leaf in a week or week and a half, and you open it up. You are going to be treated with this beautiful mature spice bush swallowtail caterpillar. So the head is down in here. These are the eye spots, the big fake eye spots that you see here. It's about 2 inches long. It's this beautiful green coloration. And just imagine if you were a nosy catbird poking around that leaf and you lifted it up slightly and you saw these big eyes coming at you, horns shooting out of the top of its head, smelled bad, you would think maybe that's some type of a serpent or a snake or something, and it would startle the bird and you would fly off, and hopefully this caterpillar would escape being eaten. But this is probably one of my favorite caterpillars that we have here in the Northeast. And like I said, if you plant a spice bush, you know, a 2 or 3 gallon pot, I would almost guarantee that first season, if you plant it early in the spring, you will have a female spice bush layer, an egg or 2 on there. And they will be on this undersurface, and it'll be a perfect little light green sphere. And here's the adult. So keep your eye open next spring and summer for this butterfly, and watch her. If you watch her and she's like dancing around plants and then you see her actually land on your spice bush, just go over slowly and watch and watch. She'll bend her abdomen and probably drop a beautiful egg on the undersurface of the leaf. Winter berries, if I had to pick one shrub for birds and attracting birds to your yard, it would be winterberry ilex, which is a lot of, you know, just fantastic plant for not just birds, but just for decoration in our yards. Those beautiful red fruits that are starting to color up now in our landscape throughout the Northeast. You know, the leaves are going to drop off. It's a deciduous holly, and you'll be left with these bare stems just covered with these bright red fruits. You know, here you see the kind of scenes you'll see in the wild around here, contrasting with, you know, our different types of white bark birch. And there are many selections that you can get. You know, typically our winter berries will get 8 to 12 feet tall. They do sucker, so they're going to form these quite large colonies of stems. So they do need some space. But don't despair if you don't have a yard that can handle something that large. There are some selections that are available that you can use if you have a small landscape and you need something a little bit smaller but still want to try to attract birds to your yard. Try the female cultivar called Red Sprite. It's only about 5 feet tall and wide and is a female, so it has these bright red fruits. If you like orange fruits, you can try Winter Gold. So you can you know, just color your yard with all different fruit colors from these winter berries. And the birds seem to eat all of them. In my observations, they'll start with the red ones and then move on to the orange and yellow. So the red are typically their first preference. So I would, if you're doing it for the birds, I would lean towards the red ones, you know, the native species. And then if you need something smaller, then turn to red sprite. And then these beautiful yellow selections, Chrysocarpa, golden verboom, these will get normal size, 8 to 10 feet tall. But again, just keep in mind, you need a male and a female. And with winter berries, when you're buying them, often you will find male and females available for sale. But just keep in mind also, you need the right boy with the right girl. The female winterberries tend to be a little picky when it comes to the boy winterberries. And one of, like, for just to give you an example, there's a very popular winterberry called winter red. And that's one that was discovered down in the southern part of the US, but perfectly hardy here in the Northeast. But it's beautiful, very, very profuse fruiting form. But it requires a male called Southern Gentleman. And the issue, if you just grow winter red up here, what happens is the flowering of the winter red, when she's in flower, it doesn't coincide with the flowering of the northern male forms. So if that flowering doesn't coincide, you're not going to get good fruit set. Not to say you won't get a few, but it won't be that profuse stem covering, you know, ridiculous amount of fruits that we want on these stems to attract as many birds as possible. So just look at the labels, and often they will say, you know, this male pollinates this female. So just keep that in mind when you're shopping for winter berries. And you can see when the birds do get to them and they like them, this is what comes out of the birds after they've eaten a lot of winter berries. Your snow doesn't look as pretty and as pristine after the robins have eaten all the winter berries on you. But that's a good thing. And I put in, you know, the native American holly just for an evergreen holly. We have trouble growing American holly up here in Maine. In Hamden, Connecticut, they were doing quite well. Again, it's a holly, but I just include it here because it is evergreen, so it's different from the winterberry or deciduous hollies. They're slow growing, our American hollies. The one you see on the left is very, very large. You know, this is probably a 25-foot tall plant that had been, you know, there for close to 30 years. Very, very prickly, shiny, dark green leaves. But again, you need male and females, and the bright red fruits are found on the females. And again, flocks of robins migrating through or in here, bluebirds, you know, other birds that overwinter will utilize these fruits and eat them up. And it was interesting, we had at the nursery a whole collection of these hollies this size, you know, maybe 8 of them in a row. And it was just interesting to watch the way the robins would start on one and just kind of move their way down the line. You know, each day or every couple of days, they would move on to the next female, eat all those fruits, and then move to the next one. But you just need patience when growing American hollies, and good thick gloves when you're working with them, because those spines, you'll end up with lots of little pinpricks in your arms. So keep that in mind too. And here's just a couple of examples of bluebirds and robins eating the holly fruits. And the native viburnums, I'm always a little hesitant now to put in our native viburnums, but they are such a good source of food for you know, birds for their fruit, but also some of our native moths will feed on, their caterpillars feed on the leaves. And the only issue now is, you know, the viburnum leaf beetle. And the viburnum leaf beetle, at least up in Maine, has been a real issue on many of our native species. Dentatum is probably one of the worst that's affected by the leaf beetle, and the adult beetles will get on, and, you know, eggs are laid, and then you'll see, you know, your leaves will look like Swiss cheese when the feeding has finished, you know, just many, many thousands of little, you know, holes all through the leaves, making it kind of like unsightly. I have noticed the past year or two, the damage isn't as bad, but it's still around. And, you know, I saw it in Connecticut as well. I imagine it's probably out on Martha's Vineyard. I'm not sure. Maybe that'll be brought up later on in the Q&A. but many other species like Viburnum casinoides, American cranberry bush, our native viburnums are affected by it, unfortunately. And unfortunately, our non-native viburnums are typically not that affected by the viburnum leaf beetle. So, that happens frequently with some of these exotic pests that come in. It's just our native plants are free game for them, and they have no defense against these new introduced, whether they're typically accidentally introduced insects. But beautiful in flower. If you're in an area where the beetles aren't bad, there's still a great choice for a plant to try. Here you see the clusters of beautiful blue fruits that develop on the terminals of the branches that you'll see birds gobble up. I've seen catbirds literally sit on the top and defend a shrub just so it can hoard all of these fruits. And there's the culprit right there, looking at me, like, don't even think about getting any closer to these fruits, they're mine. But just wonderful, a source of food for birds, our native viburnums. And they do get big. Our native viburnums typically, like our willows, will need some space. So, you need to expect a shrub that's going to get, could get 10 feet tall and, 6 to 8 feet wide. But again, they can be pruned. I don't necessarily prune them as hard as the willows, but I do get in frequently and take out some of the big stems and then let some of the smaller suckers come up. And it seems to respond quite well to that type of pruning. And they can get some pretty decent fall color. Dentatums can get really nice maroon fall colors. The coloration on American cranberry bush can be really pretty in the fall, reds and maroons. It's the same with the casinoides. The casinoides also has beautiful fruit that develop from green to pink to blue. So you get all different colorations in their fruit clusters as they develop. So just a wonderful group of shrubs, but they do have the issue with the leaf beetle. I included one native vine. Some people always question me including this, but in the wild, it's fine. And if you have a stone wall where you can allow Virginia creeper to kind of trail along it, or if there's a kind of an old tree that's, maybe recently died in your yard and you can allow Virginia creeper to crawl up it, I would do it. It attracts some fascinating insects to it, with these wonderful, dissected leaves that you see here. Look at these caterpillars of moss. This is an 8-spotted forester. This is a Pandora's sphinx. So this is related to the hornworms. It just doesn't have the horn. But these hornworms turn into beautiful moths. This is the adult moth that you see here in these incredible shades of olive and greens that you see here on the screen. And that's a big moth. That's probably got a 3 to 3.5 inch wingspan when it's flying. And they feed on Virginia creeper, the caterpillars. And here you see the moth of that forester caterpillar with these really bright orange tufts on the legs, and then the dark wings with these bright creamy white spots. And this one you'll frequently see. This is a day flying moth. So you often will see this flying around some of your flowers in your yard. If you have this species and you have some Virginia creeper, more than likely you will have this species in your yard. So look for that one during the day. And then the fruit set, look at the beautiful fruits. Aesthetically, it's gorgeous with the dark green leaves and then with the red stems holding the fruit. Just a wonderful show. And then the fall color. I mean, you can't beat that fall color on a native plant. It is just bright, burgundy red that just stands out against. This is actually growing in a large mountain laurel. So contrasting with the dark green lustrous leaves of the laurel and then these bright red maroon leaves. Just a fantastic vine. I love it. And you'll see birds up in here as they're migrating, getting ready to migrate, gobbling up these fruits left and right. So just getting kind of towards the end, I included two groups of perennials that, there's so many plants I could include in this, and we could be here for hours. And, many of the others I include in that Facebook page that Ann mentioned earlier, and on my Instagram page and things like that. But I always include these two in any talk I give on attracting, insects and increasing biodiversity into your yards. And the first one are the Asclepias, or the milkweeds. They are fantastic nectar sources for so many insects. Not just the showy butterflies that you see, like this great spangled fritillary butterfly. Their flowers are beautiful, so they're gorgeous to look at from an aesthetic point of view. They come in all different colors, from white to pink to bright orange to yellow. And there's a milkweed that you can grow in your yard for just about any kind of habitat or lighting situation that you have, starting with the bottom left, which is the tall milkweed or poke milkweed. This is Asclepias, exultata, the poke milkweed. This one actually, when you see this growing around here in the wild, it actually grows in some shade. So if you have like a high canopy shade garden, where maybe, let's say, you get a few hours of direct sunlight in the morning sun and afternoon shade, this species of Asclepias will be perfect for that kind of setting. It's not going to give you the, take over your field like the common Syriaca, the Asclepias syriaca, the common milkweed that you see in fields all over. It'll travel some, but just be a stem here or there, and not super aggressive by any means. I actually had this in a perennial border at my house in Connecticut, and I think I had it in there for 12 years, and I think when I left it, I had 15 stems total. So not a thug by any means, but these wonderful cascading, almost like shooting star type effect, or like fireworks, when they go up and then they start cascading down out of the night sky. You see, it kind of reminds me of that, as these flowers on these long peduncles, hanging down, cascading from one central point. Or, the Asclepias tuberosa, the butterfly weed, the orange one that, really loves full sun and is adaptable to many soil types, heavy clay, sandy soils. Full sun, it's a clump former, so it's not going to travel. And, it gives you these beautiful orange flowers, lots of nectar. And if you have a wet area in your yard, or swampy, a pond edge, why not try swamp milkweed, Asclepias incarnata, that you see here in the top right. And there are some selections of that you can get. Ice Ballet is a pure white form that's available. And you'll just see all types of pollinators on these, all types, from butterflies to wasps. We were fascinated with this huge wasp called a golden digger wasp. They're solitary wasps, and they're these massive orange and black wasps that you'll see on here. They look scary as all get out when you see them, but they're really harmless. They're just intent on getting food from these flowers and then they nest in the ground solitary. But they love swamp milkweed. Our plants were just covered here at the gardens with them. And other types of bees and flies utilize these plants for food. And the main reason why everybody is being encouraged to grow different types of milkweeds in their yard is to support the monarch butterfly, and to give plenty of opportunity for the females to lay their eggs on the milkweed leaves. So then we get these incredible monarch caterpillars that you see in the top left. This is a mature one, and we get to watch them. They pupate, and we can get them to increase their populations, which have had years and years of being decimated due to, loss in their habitat in Mexico, where they migrate every fall, to, now we have, in the Midwest, so many of our crops are now, the crops are Roundup ready. They're genetically modified, so now they can spray entire fields with Roundup, and the crops are not affected, but anything surrounding the fields, which is often our common milkweed, that gets wiped out by the Roundup. And leaves very little food for the females to find to lay their eggs on. So everybody now is being encouraged to support the monarchs and grow any of these different types of milkweeds we just discussed. And there are other types that I have left off that are easily grown here in the Northeast as well. And then these are just a few other examples of things you will find if you look on milkweeds. Milkweed beetles, milkweed bugs. This is a milkweed tussock moth caterpillar in the center that you see. It's about 1 inch to 1.5 inches long, a little fuzzy, looks like, you know, a little furry slipper almost, and just a cute little caterpillar that you'll find feeding on milkweeds. And all of these things feed on milkweeds. And it's kind of interesting, if you notice, they all have one thing in common. They're all brightly colored. And the caterpillars and the beetles and the bugs. And that's because they're feeding on milkweeds, which have toxic chemicals in their leaves. And that sap is poisonous to and distasteful to things. But they have the ability to eat the leaves and take in these chemicals. And that makes them distasteful and poisonous to creatures. So birds will try to eat them and find them distasteful, and will learn, hopefully, not to try them again. And then that is, you know, they're learning that ability to move on and eat something else rather than things that are feeding on milkweeds. And then the last group of plants I was going to discuss tonight are the goldenrods. And this is actually a shot of the field that I mentioned early on when I was talking about the small little 4 or 5 acre plot that I had behind my yard that I own that used to be a Christmas tree field. You can see the old Christmas trees here. A few were left, but then the rest I left as field. And then each November, before snow would begin to fly, the ground was starting to freeze, I would go in and brush hog it and cut it up high. So, you know, the seeds were left for all the birds, and any caterpillars could be finished eating and go down and hide in the leaf litter. And then I could safely go through and mow it without injuring anything. And it was perfect habitat for so many different bird species that require these open kind of successional field type habitats, like blue-winged warblers and prairie warblers and birds like the indigo buntings, things like that. But getting back to goldenrod, just excellent. You know, we saw in Doug Ptolemy's list, goldenrod was at the very top as far as the number of butterflies and moths that it supports, as far as all of the different perennials that they tested in their trials. Goldenrod was at the top. And look at some of the things you can find in these. If you go to a patch of goldenrod, if you have some goldenrod and you're taking a hike through a massive stand of goldenrod, look for this caterpillar right now. I just saw one 2 days ago. And they are crazy colored. They're yellow and orange. And then they have purple stripes and yellow stripes and a red stripe and orange stripes on. They're about 2.5 inches long. And they feed on the leaves of goldenrods as well as some of our native asters. But mainly you'll see them on goldenrods. And it turns into pretty much a nondescript brown moth that you wouldn't think much of if you saw it. But the caterpillar is just one of the most colorful ones we have here in the Northeast. But you need goldenrod if you want to attract this moth. Plant different types of goldenrod. And just saying that, be careful with the goldenrods you select, because as you can see, if you select one of the stoloniferous types that spreads by rhizomes, you are going to end up with a huge patch of it, and it could be a problem for you if you don't want the goldenrod to take over your perennial border or your yard. So when you're shopping for them, look for clump forming selections or clump forming species like things like zigzag goldenrod or gray goldenrod, or a couple of the other clump forming ones. There's another one that spreads, but very, very slowly, a selection called Fireworks, which is very, very effective. It does spread, but it's not aggressive, and it's easy to contain it into a certain point. But its inflorescence looks just like Fireworks, kind of this wide inflorescence of these cascading thin stems of little yellow flowers coming from a terminus. Very, very beautiful. And then one of the late flying hair streak butterflies, it's kind of unique to our area because it's one of two that we have in the Northeast that has green coloration on it. This is the juniper hairstreak, and it nectars frequently on the goldenrods. And kind of unique to it, it's called the juniper hairstreak because I didn't mention it earlier, but its caterpillars feed on the eastern red cedar that we talked about a little bit earlier. So that's one of its main larval food plants. Just a beautiful butterfly, probably maybe an inch tall that you see here. And with that, one other one, you can see I do like hair streaks because they are so fantastic, and so many of them do like our late season goldenrods. This is for the food that they supply. This is the red banded hair streak. And here's one of the crazy unique day flying moths that you will see on goldenrods. It's tiny, it's not even a ½ inch long, and the wings kind of curl around its body. This is called the Ailanthus webworm moth. And if you're familiar with the genus Ailanthus, or the tree of heaven, which is a horrible invasive tree, this little moth, the females lay their eggs on tree of heaven. So the more caterpillars we can get to eat the tree of heaven and eat it up, and here's a case where we wanted to defoliate them, the better. And it's just amazing looking moth. And you don't have to go out at night and see it. You'll see many of them on inflorescence of goldenrod flowers. That's called an Ailanthus webworm moth. And then just some of the other varieties, the diversity that you will attract to your yard if you plant goldenrods. From different types of flies to different types of wasps and hornets and beetles. Here's a locust beetle, soldier beetle in the center, honeybees again. And here's a fly that unfortunately a stink bug caught. So the stink bug is using the flowers of the goldenrod to hunt for things that are attracted to the flowers. And here it caught this fly and is feeding on the juices of the fly. But just such a diverse number of insects on goldenrods. I remember when I lived in Connecticut and I would walk out into that field behind my house that was loaded with that spreading goldenrod, and it was quiet, no road noise, no birds. You could literally hear the field buzzing from the number of insects between the bees and the flies and other things. It was quite impressive and quite an experience. And just to put in the importance of grasses, our native grasses, so many of particularly our native butterflies there's a group of butterflies called skippers, and some of the other butterflies like ringlets and wood nymphs, they need native grasses such as little blue stem. So it shows, and I encourage you, if you are in conservation groups, to really, keep your eye open for these little blue stem meadows and fields of native grasses if they're, becoming available for potential easements or for sale, to search them out and work hard to try to protect these habitats. They're very vital to so many of our native butterflies. These species will only utilize these native grasses to lay their eggs on. Blue stem and panicum, panic grasses, purple love grass that's flowering right now, Eragrostis, things like that. Our native grasses are very, very valuable to our native butterflies. So then I'm just wrapping up. I'm not going to really say too much. I just want to show you, it's just like 12 things, just a little collage of some of the interesting things I've taken photos of that I found in my yard in Connecticut as well as in Maine. This is actually a type of moth. This is a type of borer moth with its wings are clear. This is a day flying or a flower fly that is mimicking a yellow jacket on Eupatorium perfoliatum or bone set that's flowering right now. So it's a white, like Joe Pye weed. Here you see this is an unfortunate common wood nymph butterfly that was caught by a robber fly. And that robber fly is eating this butterfly. That was out in the field behind my house. And then there are things referred to as sawflies. You probably will find things that look like, and maybe you think they're caterpillars, that usually they're in clusters, and they're like, they can be destroying like entire branches of a tree. You'll go out and entire branch is defoliated. A lot of times those are sawflies. They'll when they're scared, they'll rear their bodies back in like a kind of an S shape, like to scare you off. But they are not caterpillars. They're sawflies belong to the Hymenoptera, or they're related to wasps, that order. And this, I happened to catch a adult sawfly wasp laying its eggs on a birch leaf. And if you look very carefully, so this female has gone all along the margin of this gray birch leaf. And you see these little puffy areas. That is each spot where she laid an egg. So just imagine then this leg is going to be covered with those little ferocious eating, very voracious caterpillars, or sawfly larvae, I should call them. They're not caterpillars, they're larvae of this wasp. Here's a giant ichneumon wasp. And this wasp searches out a type of horntail wasp whose larvae are inside the trunk of this tree. And this wasp has this enormous ovipositor that you can see kind of coils around here and then comes all the way up here, and it's all the way here. And it has this ability to pump up its last segment of its abdomen with fluid. And then it takes this ovipositor and it literally drills it into this stem, this trunk of this tree, because it can sense and it knows that the larvae is in this tree. And then it finds the larvae with its ovipositor, could go in a couple of inches, and lays its eggs inside that developing larvae. And then as this wasp larvae emerge and hatch out, they then eat the insides of that other larvae. So it's a crazy world out there that we live in, but just some fascinating stuff that you will see if you grow so many of these native plants, and you just, as I mentioned earlier, just take the time and be observant. You know, this is a great time where we're spending more time in our yards. Just, watch things, look at different things, and just take it all in. It's really, I think you'll be amazed at what you can find, right in your own backyards. The diversity of spiders that I found, these in the bottom right, these, what I call garden spiders, these large argeo spiders that you see if you walk through a field of perennials and things. You'll see many of these spiders. Here's a jumping spider with those incredible eyes, and here's a wary caterpillar, inchworm caterpillar, probably wondering if it should get the heck out of there in a hurry before the spider spots it. And here's a spider eating one of those coral hair streaks. So it was waiting on a milkweed by that milkweed flower cluster, and they are so fast it grabbed this unfortunate butterfly. Or how about a giant-eyed click beetle that I found with these big fake eyes? The head is actually here on the left, and here's something that would scare away predators. And click beetles, if you ever pick up this large one or smaller ones and hold them in your hand or your finger, their body has this hinge right here between the thorax and the abdomen. And if you hold it, it clicks and they snap it really fast. And it startles you when it does so, and startles any other predator as well. And this is about 1.5 inches long. Or if you ever see a polyphemus moth, we looked at cecropias, and the polyphemus, again, these massive caterpillars and just these unbelievable moths you see. There are different types of beetles. This rhinoceros beetle that you see here with that big horn. I saw this, when I first saw this, I thought, this should be in like Africa somewhere, not in Hamden, Connecticut. In dragonflies, you bring in lots of different insects. The dragonflies are going to come there, regardless if you have a pond in your yard. Dragonflies will find your yard. They move around. They don't just stay near water. They'll find, if you have lots of different insects, mosquitoes and flies and things, they'll be there hunting for you, and you can then appreciate their beauty. Here's a little amberwing dragonfly. Or little tree frogs that you find here. It's on one of just a lawn chair hanging out. And here's another one. This is a younger one. They start out green and then become that gray color, sitting on I think this was a ginkgo leaf. Or salamanders, they'll be attracted to your yards. If you could provide lots of cover, here you do, obviously, you need things like vernal pools to attract some of these amphibians. And then turtles, turtles in Connecticut before I left, many of the turtles in Connecticut were on, either they were endangered or they were on the threatened list or special concern because their numbers were dwindling. And that's mainly because of development. And we keep putting in new roads and more developments. And what do turtles do? They cross roads to get to their areas where they're going to lay eggs, and they get hit. They're not, as we all know, they don't move too fast. And most people won't stop and help them across. And their numbers have gone down. They need some of those open field areas and sandy areas to lay their eggs. And those types of habitats are disappearing. And big snapping turtles with these incredible, scary looking digging claws that it uses to dig out and excavate a nest site. And these happy trio of green frogs hanging out. So that was it. So I'll leave you with this hungry looking little tree swallow, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Hopefully there are a few. Hopefully this will encourage you to ask questions and encourage you to, do whatever you can to add, as much diversity to your yards, add more native plants and do whatever we can to increase the number of species we have in our yards. And I thank you for joining us, and come to the gardens in Maine and I give you a little tour. And don't forget, in another week, the plant sale. So it's a good opportunity for you to buy some of these native plants and get them in your yards and start attracting some of these amazing insects and animals to your yards.
Well,
So
thank
you very much.
Thank you so much. That was fascinating, amazing photos, really inspiring. Some neat facts about common plants that I personally never knew. So thanks.
Sure. No, my pleasure. I love it. Yeah.
So we're just going to jump into a couple of questions quickly here.
Okay.
All right. So are there any types of insects that you don't want to try to encourage, or is all diversity beneficial?
Yeah, that's a tough one. There are a few things, here in Maine, and well, like down your way, obviously I wouldn't try to plant things to attract gypsy moths, and, other things that might cause harm to us as humans. Here in Maine, we have the brown-tailed moth, and it's related to gypsy moth, and it's actually, in my opinion, worse than gypsy moth because the hairs on the caterpillars are extremely irritating. And if you're working with them and get them on your skin, you don't just get a slight rash. Some people are highly allergic to it and have been hospitalized because of it. If you breathe in the hairs that linger, you can get very bad respiratory issues. And so people can't put their clothes out on the line anymore here in Maine because when the caterpillars are out, the hairs fly through the air and they get on your clothes. So then you go to put that nice smelling shirt on and you start breaking out in a rash because the little hairs from that. So no, I wouldn't encourage everything, but I think majority of the insects, I would encourage. There are a few things you need to watch, like that red hump caterpillar I showed. If they get on a small little poplar you just bought at a nursery and it's only 5 feet tall, they could eat every leaf off it, and that could cause some distress to the tree. So there you would have to kindly remove those leaves and see if you can find a neighboring tulip poplar tree to put them on, or another food source for them. And I usually, if I'm not quite sure what the other food sources are, is, do a quick Google search and, just type in host plant for a caterpillar or something. And a lot of times you'll come up with some pretty good information.
Oh, that's a great idea. Maybe I can rehome some of my tomato hornworms.
Yeah, so yeah, that's true. So tomato hornworms, yeah.
Okay, so if you leave an area of your yard to go wild, how do you differentiate between the beneficial native plants that pop up and the aggressive or invasive plants that might want to colonize the area?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, and I still do it. I need to use guidebooks, and I attend classes, that different groups are offering now. Even the virtual ones are great. Many of the arboretums offer classes, and there's some great sources online, and I'm happy to add a few of those too. I'm going to do a plant list that we're going to share with everybody who attended if they want it. And I could include a few of the online sources that I use for kind of plant ID things, because that's a good point. There are some things, many, things that'll become very weedy if you don't, maintain them or remove them right away. And, like, you don't want leave bittersweet seedlings coming up, obviously, because that will take over. But it's learning. I mean, it's just identifying them, or that's the way I've done it, is just picking a leaf or a part of it and going in and looking at your Newcomb's Wildflower book or other guidebooks and trying, or getting on, I hate to say it, but getting on Facebook. And there are so many plant ID groups now. You take a picture and you put it to New England Plants and say, I found this in my yard in Martha's Vineyard. I need help identifying it. And within the first hour, you'll have the thing identified by some expert. Or iNaturalist online now. That's a fantastic app to use now. It's free. You sign up and you send your pictures in, and people will tell you what it is. And it's fantastic. And I'll list a lot of those. I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
Thanks.
But there's lots to learn. Always.
So we have some questions that are all sort of on a theme of things that the questions are all related to, is this thing beneficial or is this thing not beneficial?
Okay.
So the first thing is plants that are native but considered aggressive, like Virginia creeper. Is that beneficial, not beneficial? Does it have to do with context?
So yes, I would, in my opinion, I would say it's beneficial, but again, everybody's yard is different, and things like Virginia creeper, they do need space. And in my yard, even in Hamden, there were times where I had to go in and pull it off of trees and let smaller ones start over. And that's something that could be done, is, and just keep an eye on them. But if you have a small yard, you probably, Virginia creeper may not be a good choice then. If, you want to have a vine that, you don't want to have a vine that's going to literally grow 30, 40 feet if you just allow it to do so. So a lot of it is context and what you have as far as a yard. And, a lot of times it's unfortunate, but a lot of times your neighbors don't like that kind of stuff either.
Yep.
They don't want to see a vine growing up in a tree or covering up a beautiful stone wall. And so you just have to convince your neighbors to do the same thing.
So how about Japanese beetles in terms of whether they have any beneficial qualities? Same thing with honeybees. I know we know they do have some beneficial qualities, but do they outcompete native bees and native pollinators?
Not, we've got a bee expert here, and she never indicated, and I've taken several classes with her, she never suggested that, and we have 14 hives now at the gardens, and there's been no indication that they're having any detrimental effects on our native bee populations here at the gardens.
Okay.
So that I haven't heard of any concerns, and our master beekeeper, she never indicated, and actually now we're starting up a native bee exhibit that we're going to have next spring. So I don't think it's with Japanese beetles. No, that's another one. I would not encourage Japanese beetles.
Okay.
But it's hard not to have things in your yard that they're not going to be attracted to. I mean, it's not one that you can plant. I think they eat so many different things that I think it's just something, at least I've decided, you just need to deal with. And I wouldn't suggest putting up those traps. I don't think they're particularly effective. It just brings back terrible memories. When I was a small child, I used to do yard work for a very elderly couple, and my one job was to go to their rose bushes and take a little can and pick off every Japanese beetle. So no, I'm not a fan of them, and unfortunately, I think it's just I've always dealt with them in my garden.
Do you ever use pesticides or herbicides in your home landscape or at Coastal Maine? When do you think it's appropriate to do so? Should it always be a last resort?
So since I've been here for 3 years, we have not used any herbicides, and we have some pretty invasive issues, plants and things, and we're trying to do it by eradication, by hand tools, and just aggressively keeping on top of it and trying to smother things. As far as pesticides, the only time I think they would be used here, and would be if it was going to be an issue of human health. We would use that. If there was an insect that was going to cause potential damage to visitors when they were here, we would have to then apply something in the safest manner possible. But that would be the last resort that we would go to. In my home yard in Connecticut, no, I didn't use anything, and it showed. I mean, that's why my lawn was full of weeds, and I had to, I was always hand pulling bittersweet and invasive mugwort, artemisia, and garlic mustard, things like that. I would never spray things, and I know there are methods that can be used to control, things like Japanese knotweed, where I know they've come up with some methods that they say are, as safe as things are going to get if they need to, if they need to be used, painted on the stems rather than broadcast sprayed. So you're very focused and you're pinpointing where these herbicides are applicated. It's centered, focused on one certain area rather than a broad section. But even there, I don't like the idea of it. I mean, I understand in some cases it may need to be used, but I'm all for physical labor and trying to smother things with cardboard and paper and try that root black plastic. I mean, there are some, organic methods that people have tried, but, there are some really tough weeds that you're just not going to get with some of these organic, technical herbicides that are vinegar based and things like that. I mean, they knock them down, but again, you just have to be very diligent with their applications.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, last one here, I think. Morning Glory was on that list of the top 5 herbaceous plants from Bringing Nature Home. Is it a native perennial?
You know, it's funny. That's a good question. You asked that. That was one on that list I've never grown before in my
Okay.
yard. So I'm not sure. You know, that's a good. There are, I think, some native morning glories, but then you just need to be. There's where you need to be careful with proper ID, because there are some invasive things out there that closely resemble some of our native ones that, you know, some invasive bindweeds that could cause some issues. And, you know, there are even some native plants, you know, I talked about the goldenrods and how beneficial they are, but again, it's selection of what species you plant is very critical. And, you know, that goes with several different, you know, type genera, you know, several different genera. You can pick the wrong species and end up with too good of a good thing. Like, you know, our native milkweed, the Syriaca. Most people can't grow that in their perennial borders. They need to use one of the other clump forming species. But you know, I've always wanted to try some of the native morning glory, and I haven't. And it's mainly because Doug's talked about those, and I just never done it. But maybe this encourages me to check them out and try it. Yeah.
Excellent. And some of our watchers too. All right. Well, thank you so much for this really interesting and inspiring talk,
Oh,
Andy.
my pleasure. Yeah.
Honored to have you with us and looking forward to having you on the island in person as soon
Yeah.
as possible.
Let's hope that happens next year if things settle down.
Sure. And if anyone has follow-up questions for Andy, you can email info@polyhillarboretum.org and we'll send them his way. So
Yeah, and I'll get a list together of the plants that I talked about and some of the sources for information. And I'll get that to you.
that would be
And then
wonderful.
you can forward that on. Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks, Andy.
Alrighty.
I hope has a great night.
You too. Okay. Good to see everybody. Okay. Bye-bye.